the scriptures. And when they do, they discover that they teach the sovereignty of God and salvation. Because using the same form of hermeneutics by which they defend the resurrection, John 6 says what John 6 says. Ephesians 1 says what Ephesians 1 says. Romans 9 says what Romans 9 says. And as long as they just can't talk about that, they will continue producing Calvinists. And I can guarantee you there were people there, as Calvary Chapel folks, who will end up in a Reformed church. Why? Because of exactly what I've been saying. But it seems that in certain people's minds, instead of hearing what I'm saying and realizing, oh, there's some truth to that, it's you are terrible, and you are mean, and you are attacking, and blah, 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 instead of dealing with the issue. And as long as they keep focusing upon personal stuff, that's what's going to happen. I have pondered whether what Pastor Tassi did was his way of demonstrating his love for the Calvary Chapel leadership in taking a shot at that terrible, horrible meanie who, you know, we have to take phone calls about stuff that he says, and we know that there have been people who are coming up in the Calvary Chapel movement. They were future leaders, and now they're off in some Reformed Baptist church someplace or a Presbyterian church someplace. And it's all James White's fault, and I'm gonna let him have it. I don't know. All I know is a debate didn't take place. And I apologize for that, but I hope that for those that came out, at least what I tried to do was of some benefit. Along the same lines of anti-Calvinist derangement syndrome, another video came out from Jacob Prasch. And in this, he says, I'm an embarrassment. He's addressing the Muslims and apologizing for me being such an embarrassment and things like that. Jacob Prasch pretty much has the take no prisoners, black flag, scorched earth approach to everything. And since we dared to respond to him, which he interprets as an attack, since we dared to point out that making assertions like Calvin got his doctrines from the Muslims, that requires a certain level of reasoning and historical argumentation that Jacob Prasch has never even attempted to offer. He's decided that, all right, even the witness to Muslims can be sacrificed for his attack upon me as an individual. And he attacks many other people. I've seen all sorts of videos where he attacks John MacArthur and all the rest of that stuff. So he's a very, very, very divisive individual. Extremely divisive. And people accuse me of being divisive. Oh, you were just talking about William Lane Craig. And I did so without engaging in ad hominem against William Lane Craig. And if any of you think that I did, you clearly don't know what ad hominem is. That's the problem. Jacob Prasch knows what it is and is expert at it, okay? But in this video, he seems to have an absolute obsession with his knowledge of languages. Evidently, this is extremely important to him. Now, I've never seen a vitae. I don't know where he's taught. He started, and it's interesting, there is a progression in those who have ACDS where they make an argument at one point, and then 2 videos later, that argument has grown massively without ever having been substantiated by factual information. So he doesn't like that Columbia Evangelical does not have ATS accreditation. Now, I guess Fuller doesn't have ATS accreditation either, and Grand Canyon doesn't have ATS. Now all my degrees are unaccredited. Oh, every single one of them. It's just amazing how things grow over time. It's funny. And my having taught both Greek and Hebrew in fact, let me think a second. Yeah, now I think about it. I have never taught the biblical languages at an unaccredited institution. I've only taught them at accredited institutions. maybe Jacob Prosh has done as much teaching as I have in that area. I don't have any evidence of it. He evidently was extremely offended that I pointed out that, every time I talk with Muslims around the world, they say, inshallah, if God wills. His pronunciation, I had never heard a Muslim use. And so I pointed that out. Well, I guess I shouldn't have done that. But I want to just play one clip, because what is the one thing that we have pointed out repeatedly over and over and over again that he has ignored? And that is the thing we focused upon in Radio Free Geneva, which is not the name of my ministry. Haven't heard any correction to that either, but that's sort of how that goes. What we played in that Radio Free Geneva that I did from Colorado was the issue of what 1 Timothy chapter 2 is about, and the fact that any meaningful, fair, accurate exegesis of that text is going to see the flow of the text and going to see that Paul is talking about types and kinds of people, because he talks about kings and those in authority. You cannot avoid, if you ask the question, what category does kings and those in authority fall into? It is kind and type. You can't avoid that. And then sometime last week, I think, I pointed out, because evidently he has followers that listen to the dividing line, I pointed out that 1 Timothy 2:3 begins with the demonstrative pronoun tuta. Hudis haute tuta is the lexical form. Hudis haute tuta, the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms. And this is good and acceptable before God our Savior. And I pointed out that this clearly connects the subject of verses 1 and 2, that is prayer for those who are in leadership, with verses 4 and following, not only grammatically, but conceptually as well. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. So the all men of verse 4, by any fair, rational means of exegesis, is connected with what came in verses 1 and 2, which is what I've said from